Hello, this is Don Hall. In this video we're going to talk about firing electric kilns. This is my kiln here in my studio. It's called a 2710. It means it has 10 bricks around and it's 27 inches in the chamber. I use it mostly for bisque firing, but sometimes I'll do a glaze firing as well. I'm going to show you here how I program it for a bisque fire. And then we're going to go up to Quyle Kilns up in Murphy's, California, visit my best bud, Pamela Quyle. And she's a production potter and she knows all the ins and outs about having a successful fire. And she's going to show us some of her tips and things that she does to have a successful firing. Looking down into the kiln, this is a piece that I'm getting ready to fire. All right, I've closed the lid and I'm getting ready to program this firing. It's very simple on this kiln. I just go to cone fire. It says, ask me for preheat. How long do I want to preheat this kiln? I'm going to say 1 hour and 30 minutes. It's fairly dry. I push enter. The next thing it asks me which cone, how hot do I want to make it? I want to make it to cone 01. And I push enter. And the speed, I want to do it slowly because it's a bisque fire. Enter. Hold. How long do I want to hold it at the end? I don't, because it's just a bisque fire. Put an enter. And we're ready to go. In about 12 to 14 hours, I should be able, it should go off, and then about another 7-10 hours later, I should be able to open it and see what I got. All right, just a word about this fire, and I know it seems a little unusual to a lot of people that I would bisque fire to cone 01, but I do that for a reason. I want to get my piece as hot as I can without burning off the underglaze. I'll fire it to 01, then I'll take it out, put some clear glaze on it, and refire it to cone 06. This is sculpture. It's not dinnerware, so it doesn't need to be fired so high. And so I'm ready to go now. Let's get in the car, go up to Pamela Quyle and see what she can teach us. Okay. All right. So I made it up to Murphy's at Quyle Kilns. I'm up here with Pamela, who is she runs a pottery that has production pottery as well as classes. And she fires in electric kilns that are more industrial in style than the one that I use at home. So say hello, Pam.
Hi. And so my kilns are a different shape than most people's. They are a coffin kiln, and I use 16 by 16 inch shelves on them, so it makes stacking a little different than it does, and square shelves, so that it makes for most people who have round kilns and or smaller ones. So we're going to look at a couple of the tricks that I figured out to keep pieces from breaking. So I mentioned that I have older kilns, which I do. These are built in the 1970s, and these were these are called Firemaster. The company's long gone, but since there's not that much in a kiln that you need to replace, they're still with me. Now, I don't have any bells and whistles. I literally have 3 on and off switches and a kiln sitter, and that's it. But generally, in our shop, we're doing production, which means I have a lot of pieces that are the same size consistently, and I stack the kilns in that in one way when I'm doing all things that are similar in size. But since we're also teaching, I have all sorts of odd things that are different heights and give me different problems. So I wanted to show this piece that I've got in the kiln now, which is a hand-built chicken. This is getting ready for a bisque firing. And the piece is 14 inches tall. And so this can be somewhat of a problem. And I have done something here, which I think is very helpful for me. If I just put in a post to get myself up to 14 inches, it's wobbly. And as I take things in and out of the kiln, if I put shelves on top of this, I just feel uncomfortable with having just one post. And so what I have is a 12-inch post with a 2-inch on the top. Let me set this neatly. And then butted up to it, I have a 10-inch post with a 4 on top. Now I've got my 14 inches. These are still a little bit wobbly, so I'm going to bridge them with just a little piece of broken kiln shelf so that this just doesn't have as much wiggle to it. And then I've done this on all 4 sides. And because in this kiln I have 4 sets of elements at the bottom, it's a lot going on for a piece to come up slowly enough. So I've used pieces of kiln shelf to create what would be a bag wall in a glaze, gas firing, but this is just what I call these as baffles. So I'm using this to baffle the heat so I don't have the direct heat from the elements hitting on the piece. The other thing I have is I've set this piece onto another kiln shelf that's honeycombed so that I'm not putting it directly on the bottom of the kiln, which is a sure way to have pieces crack. So I've got enough support with my 4 sets of posts bridged across, the pieces on a honeycombed kiln shelf. So I feel very comfortable that this piece will have an even heating, and I'll do this both for the bisque and for the glaze firing. And then I use what I call wadding, which is a little piece of clay that I have alumina hydrate powder on, and this will help me set the shelf in and nestle the shelf in so that it's nice and cushy. And let me just set up. So as I said, I put a little bit of wadding on top of my posts, and then as I set my next shelf in, I'm going to get a nice cush. It just helps keep everything level and stable. I showed you that I was using little pieces of wadding to level my shelf so that I have stability, but I use alumina hydrate in a whole bunch of different ways around the shop. So it's a material that has a melting point of like 3,000 degrees. So it stays really inactive as a powder in my kiln. So I punch colanders, so I have little punch outs from all my colanders, and I put alumina hydrate powder on those. And then I keep them in a jar with a damp sponge. And so they're always little nice cushy little bits that will squish down and be levelers. Probably what I find the most useful use of alumina hydrate is to work as ball bearings, essentially, in a kiln where I'm trying to fire a flat piece. As pieces heat in the kiln, they have to shrink in a little bit, and so if they hang up on a kiln shelf, it's more likely to crack. And so I've discovered that I can fire flat pieces pretty easily as long as I use my alumina hydrate. So this is a student work. It's glazed, and it's an oval. And so I'm going to make a layer of alumina hydrate on my kiln shelf where this can sit on it, and it will be able to slide if it needs to in the kiln while firing. So here I am. I have alumina hydrate, and I'm making an oval out of it at about the size I'm going to need for the piece. Doesn't have to be totally level, because as I put this in, it's going to sit on here, and I can make sure that it's got a little cush as it fires. So at the end of the firing, I can reuse the alumina. I'm simply going to put it right back into a tray, and I just keep the tray and I reuse it time after time after time. Since it's inert, I'll take this kiln shelf over and rinse off the rest of the powder that's on it so that it doesn't fall in the next load. But anyway, so I can just keep reusing this much for years. So in loading this kiln, I've got some of my production work in here. These are jiggered bowls. This piece, which is wheel thrown, I have baffled, much as I did with the big pieces, just with 2 posts on either side. Because I have an element right here, and it's going to be hitting the side of the bowl. I'm just adding a little bit of deflection of the heat so that the bowl doesn't have a chance to crack or warp. So in this little side section of my kiln, I have mugs that are all just right at 6 inches. I do not want to waste a whole inch post on when I don't need it. So I have broken up old kiln shelves, and I have them in 3 different thicknesses. So I call them a nibble. I'm sure there's some other name for it, but I'm just going to set this on. This will allow me to set my shelf in with plenty of room for each one of the cups, but not have to use a whole inch of hot kiln shelf. If you're lucky enough, or you find them, there is a product that is a plate stacker that can go into your kiln, which makes dealing with dinnerware so much pleasanter. These come in multiple sizes. They stack one on top of each other, and so you can put a plate in and a plate in and a plate in. And if I was going to stack a shelf with just 3 plates, then I can go ahead and stack all sorts of things around the edges with a post and a nibble, probably a piece of wadding on top, so that I can fill the kiln thoroughly. But each one of these plates will be firing in the same heat, so the glaze should come out the same each time on each plate. I've seen a lot of people asking questions on various Facebook pot groups about having black specks in their pottery, and I can show you, this is my thermocouple, which has now disintegrated to the point of no return. So I'll be replacing this, and then I won't be getting black specks, and you can see on the bottom of my kiln where they've been falling, and they'll fall into your pots just as nicely. The solution for that is a new thermocouple and then a cover. So this is a porcelain probe cover that you have to make your hole a little bit bigger, and then this slides over, goes through the brick, and protects your pottery from this thermocouple failing. So Don was asking me if I have any hints on using an old kiln like mine that doesn't have any bells or whistles. I have 2 whistles. I have a kiln sitter, which I'll demonstrate, and I have the thermocouple, which I showed you mine is flawed, and then it attaches to a pyrometer, which I use to know what's going on. And so it allows me to have a couple different ways to check what's going on in the kiln. So I have a little collection here of different normally used cones that I'm using in my shop a lot. So I have high temperature cones and I have low temperature cones. I generally biscuit 06. I generally glaze fire at cone 6. So there's a lot of difference between 06 and 6. If I take a bar cone out, and this is a bar cone, this is going to go into my kiln sitter. So when I'm loading this, I'm using a hand on either side of my kiln because I have a little latch thing here, and I'm sitting this into these 2 holders. This comes down, and then it's going to melt at a specific temperature. This one's going to be an 06. When that little cone melts, it mechanically drops and shuts off the kiln. So I have a timer, I have an automatic melting system that mechanically drops and turns off the kiln, and I have my pyrometer. So I have my 3 systems to make sure that my kiln's doing what I want it to do. Another little thing, all of your safety parts on your kiln can all fail. And so if you're looking and you can see the color in your kiln, you should be able to get a pretty good idea of how hot your kiln is simply by the color of the heat. And so I have a little chart where I can say, well, if it's a dull cherry red, it's pretty low temperature, but it gets hotter and oranger and more yellow, and it gets up to white. If it's on blue, you're in really serious trouble. So this is a good thing to have, and then you can get an idea just by looking at the color approximately where you are in your firing.
Jesus Christ. Okay, I'm back in my studio. The bisque fire to cone 01 is completed, and I took the piece out, I glazed it, I put it back in. Now I'm going to show you how I'm going to set it for the glaze firing. All right, the bisque firing I did took 14 hours to get hot. Then it cooled down for another 10 hours or so. And now it's ready to go ahead with my glaze fire. So I'm going to do the same thing I did before. I go to cone fire, and I'm going to preheat it this time just for 10 minutes. And then I'm going to fire it to cone 06 for my glaze. And then I'm going to pick the speed, and I like to do that on medium. Sometimes if you do it on fast, it can crack, so I like to hold it. And holding time, I really don't need to hold it, but let's hold it for 5 minutes. And start, and away we go, and probably about 6-7 hours, it should shut itself off. A day has passed. I'm back in my studio. It's time to open up the kiln and see how my glaze firing came out. As you can see, there's 3 different bits of information that keep flashing on the kiln after it has shut itself off from getting hot. One, it says complete. That means it's done. It's not going to do anything else. Then I get a number that's 8.14. That means it took 8 hours and 14 minutes to get to temp. And the last one, 98, that's what the temperature of the inside of the kiln is now, that it's completely cooled down. My glaze fire in this kiln is complete, and I'm going to look in there now and see what we got. Oh, there it is. Glaze fire Tacona 06. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I have to thank Pamela Quyle for her sharing all her hard-learned knowledge over the years. And if you get up to Northern California, come stop by, see Pam Quyle Kilns. I'm sure you'll enjoy yourself. And if you enjoy this channel and enjoy this video, please subscribe to our channel. Look for a new video next week.